It is now, when we are called as witnesses of the world, to mend it, to change its course, to restore it. It is now, when we are called to act on our values, not to hide, not to fear, but to be bold and loud. It is now that we are called to continue our fight for justice, to organize, to speak up. It is now. Let us gather. Let us give each other courage. Let us worship. As is our custom, if you'd like to come and light a candle for whatever personal or private reason, please do so while we sit in stillness, listening to the prelude. Please rise in body or spirit for our chalice lighting and spoken affirmation. Erica Hewitt brings us our chalice lighting words this morning, until all means all. The chalice is a symbol of Unitarian Universalism. It arose as a beacon of hope in an atmosphere of tyranny. The chalice arose as a sign of promise that the marginalized world would neither be forgotten nor ignored, because they are beloved and precious from the perspective of the holy. This morning, we remember all of the people who have been told explicitly or implicitly, through police violence or government policy, through derision or dehumanization, that they're anything less than whole, anything less than beloved. As we light our chalice, may we make of our lives a beacon, a symbol of our promise to draw the circle wide, a sign that we will not rest until all means all. Please join me as together we remind ourselves of the affirmation that is the cornerstone of our free faith tradition. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in freedom, and to help one another. You may be seated. Today is our 9th Peace Sunday, continuing our look at great peacemakers, true stories from around the world. Our focus this Sunday and the next Peace Sunday will be on leaders caring for the planet. Rachel Carson, the author of Silent Spring, and David Suzuki, a Canadian biologist and environmentalist, are our leaders for this morning. Much of the dialogue about the leaders is taken directly from the book. Fountainhead of modern environmental movement, American biologist Rachel Carson sounded the alarm about the dangers of pesticide in her seminal book, Silent Spring, which still sells more than 25,000 copies every year. Calling for a truce and what she saw as a war against nature, Carson endured an assault against her health by cancer and an assault against her credibility by chemical companies as she sought to remind people of the importance of respecting the balance of nature. In 1907, Rachel Louise Carson was born in Springdale, Pennsylvania, where her father had purchased 65 acres of land, hoping that nearby Pittsburgh would grow towards Springdale. When this did not happen, the family was left financially strained. But because the area remained rural, Carson had the opportunity to spend her childhood taking in the wonders of nature. Intending to become a writer, Carson entered Pennsylvania College for Women, now Chatham College, and majored in English. While fulfilling the college's science requirement, though, Carson became fascinated with the sciences and suddenly switched her major to zoology. After earning her bachelor's degree in 1928, she visited the Marine Biological Laboratory at Woods Hole, Massachusetts, where for the first time she saw the ocean. Awestruck, she decided to specialize in marine zoology and earned her master's degree from Johns Hopkins University in 1932. After her father and sister passed away, Carson took her mother and her sister's 2 children. To support the family, Carson applied for a government job and became the first female biologist ever hired by the U.S. Bureau of Fisheries. Her first assignments, writing radio programs and brochures about the ocean, merged her 2 loves, writing and nature. When one of her essays was published in a magazine, she was encouraged to expand it to a full-length book. Carson's book, Under the Sea Wind, was published in 1941, but sold few copies at the time because sales of nature-themed books plummeted after Japan bombed Hawaii's Pearl Harbor later that year. Shortly after World War II, Carson was promoted to editor-in-chief of the Fish and Wildlife Service's Information Division. In her free time, she wrote her second book, The Sea Around Us. Published in 1951, it quickly hit the New York Times bestseller list and remained there for a record 86 weeks. Readers apparently appreciated Carson's way of describing the sea, both scientifically and poetically. She responded, quote, "If there is poetry in my book about the sea, it is not because I deliberately put it there, but because no one could write truthfully about the sea and leave out the poetry," unquote. Now financially secure, Carson resigned from the Fish and Wildlife Service and began writing full-time. Her third book, The Edge of the Sea, became a bestseller soon after it was published in 1955. Later that same year, Carson's niece passed away, leaving her 5-year-old son, whom Carson dutifully adopted. In raising her nephew, Carson took him on many outings to explore seaside tide pools and strove to encourage his sense of wonder of the natural world. She reflected, quote, "The more clearly we can focus our attention on the wonders and realities of the universe about us, the less taste we shall have for the destruction of our race," unquote. However, such outings became less frequent in 1958 after Carson received a letter from Olga Huckins. Olga, who was an owner of a private bird sanctuary in Massachusetts. Despite Hutchins' objections, the government, as part of a campaign to control mosquitoes, had sprayed her property with insecticide. Immediately following the spraying, Huckins found legions of birds twitching in convulsions or lying dead on the ground, signs that they had been poisoned by the insecticide DDT. Huckins begged Carson to find someone who could prevent the sanctuary from being sprayed again. Try as she might, though, Carson could not find anyone and decided to take up the cause herself. She considered writing a magazine article about dangerous insecticides, but the more she learned, the more she realized that the topic warranted more comprehensive analysis in a full-length book. The concerned author said, quote, "There would be no peace for me if I kept silent," unquote. And she began what would become the pinnacle of her life's work, Silent Spring. Initially titled The War Against Nature, Carson's manuscript explained that before World War II, crop-damaging insects were controlled through biological methods, such as introducing insects' natural predators, or through simple insecticides based on plants or animals or minerals. Carson praised these approaches for, quote, "not doing violence to nature's balance," unquote. After the war, however, these approaches were replaced with products of the synthetic chemical industry. Carson reported, quote, "This industry is a child of the Second World War. In the course of developing agents of chemical warfare, some of the chemicals created in the laboratory were found to be lethal to insects. The discovery did not come by chance. Insects were widely used to test chemicals as agents of death for man," unquote. Carson learned that DDT in particular was dusted on soldiers during the war to control lice. Powdered DDT was not easily absorbed through the skin, but when dissolved in oil, as it usually was for agricultural applications, it was toxic. Insecticides such as DDT not only harmed the target insects, which often developed resistance to its insecticides, they also harmed beneficial insects, wildlife, livestock, and humans who ate contaminated crops or animal products. Furthermore, in humans, there appeared to be a direct link between excessive or repeated exposure to DDT and liver damage and cancer. Sadly, while researching these issues, Carson herself was diagnosed with breast cancer. After having surgery, she underwent radiation treatments twice a week and her hair fell out. Enduring near constant pain, she continued working on her book, began wearing a wig, and kept her illness confidential, lest anyone accuse her of seeking revenge against the chemical companies. On the contrary, Carson did not seek revenge or an end to the use of all agricultural chemicals, just an end to the overuse of the most hazardous ones in order to preserve human health and nature's balance. She warned that the balance of nature cannot be ignored any more than the law of gravity. Renamed Silent Spring in reference to the prospect of a spring without birdsong, the book was published in September of 1962. In the well-documented expose, Carson again blended science and poetry, alternating explanations of the chemical makeup of chlorinated hydrocarbons with poignant passages such as, quote, "Who has decided? Who has the right to decide for the countless legions of people who were not consulted that the supreme value is a world without insects, even though it might also be a sterile world ungraced by the curving wing of a bird in flight? The question is whether any civilization can wage relentless war on life without destroying itself and without losing the right to be called civilized." Within 2 weeks of publication, Silent Spring became a bestseller. Silent Spring had far-reaching effects. In April of 1963, CBS Reports televised an interview with Carson, and although chemical companies tried every angle to discredit her, and 2 sponsors withdrew funds for the broadcast, it aired nonetheless. This telecast prompted the government to take immediate action, and the next day, the U.S. Senate announced that it would hold hearings on pesticide use. During these hearings, Carson testified, quote, "First, I hope this committee will give serious consideration to a much neglected problem, that of the right of the citizen to be secure in his own home against the intrusion of poisons applied by other persons. I strongly feel that this is, or should be, one of the basic human rights," unquote. After the President's Science Committee released a report confirming the warnings that Carson had expressed in Silent Spring, a 2-year investigation of pesticide regulations was launched. Still suffering from cancer and related complications, in the spring of 1963, Carson spent time on the coast of Maine with her friends Stan and Dorothy Freeman. Watching monarch butterflies flutter about, Carson said that she knew it would be her last summer and she would not see butterflies again. Accepting this with equanimity, she later wrote to Dorothy, quote, "When any living thing has come to the end of its life cycle, we accept that end as natural. For the monarch, that cycle is measured in a known span of months. For ourselves, the measure is something else, the span of which we cannot know. But the thought is the same. When that intangible cycle has run its course, it is a natural and not unhappy thing that life comes to its end." In April of 1964, the life of 56-year-old Carson came to an end. Even after Carson's death, her message continued to be taken seriously. A 650-acre park was dedicated to environmental preservation and provides opportunities for quiet enjoyment of the natural environment. This park is in the Brookville area of Montgomery County and was acquired just after Carson's death and dedicated in her memory, the Rachel Carson Conservation Park. On December 16, 1966, Congress established the Coastal Maine National Wildlife Refuge under the authority of the Migratory Bird Conservation Act. In a formal dedication ceremony on June 27, 1970, the refuge was renamed in honor of the scientist and author Rachel Carson, who spent much of her life along the Maine coast. During the mid-1970s, the refuge acquired 4,000 acres and has expanded its boundaries several times over the years to provide coastal salt marshes from encroaching development, and thereby protecting the vital wildlife habitat. The refuge now stretches 50 miles along the coast. In 1970, the Environmental Protection Act was established, and 2 years later, DDT was banned in the U.S., except for use in quarantine, public health, and export. In 1980, Carson was posthumously awarded the President Medal of Freedom, the America's highest civil honor. The medal citation summarized the impact that Rachel Carson had during her lifetime and beyond. Quote, always concerned, always eloquent, she created a tide of environmental consciousness that has not ebbed. We will now hear a song written about Rachel Carson, performed by Ellis Paul, and followed with a few more famous quotes.
Rachel went a-walking in the woods at twilight, talking to the animals, listening to the trees. She heard the beauty in the whistling songbird, the rustling of the hickory, the buzzing of the bees. She wandered, wondering what could she bring to give a voice to the silence of the spring. One day came the big bulldozers, the planes dropping chemicals, the people cutting trees. Rachel saw the bald eagle suffering high up in the canopy to the edge of the sea. She wandered, wondering what could she bring to give a voice to the silence of the spring. Oh, they're tearing the big trees down. They're covering the crops with a cloud of spray. And the bulldozers and the high-rises from town will come so close you can't hear the forest sound. Rachel wrote a book on an old typewriter about the poison in the atmosphere and in the air that we breathe. She told the truth and the world started listening. She was talking for the animals, speaking for the trees. She wandered, wondering what could she bring to give a voice to the silence of the spring.
As we prepare ourselves for meditation, let us hear these words by Jessica Purple Rondella, Prayer of a War Atheist. My prayer today is that I learn to stay a war atheist. My prayer today for each of us, for everyone in this nation, in this world, is that we all learn to be war atheists. I don't believe in war anymore. My prayer today is that I never again succumb to fear. Fear which seduces me to believe the expediency of violence provides a permanent answer. Fear which clouds my judgment and convinces me firmly that violence is a fix. Fear which tempts me to justify violence, teasing its response from defensiveness towards offensiveness action. Fear which feeds the lie, allowing us to collaborate with violent euphemisms that bury our need to count the victims of our violence. Fear that misnames collateral damage, friendly fire, and just war. Fear is the ultimate weapon of mass destruction. Fear is the ultimate cause of war. And I just don't believe in it anymore. Yes, I pray to stay a war atheist. I pray that we not be fooled by the lure of a violent cure. Let us instead reach toward healing. Let us resolve to heal the world, to teach the world, and yield only the sword of truth. Let us arm ourselves with Satyagrahua, Gandhi's word for his steady, assertive, nonviolent rebellion. Satyagrahua meaning soul force. Satyagrahua defeats our fears. It reclaims our courage. It encourages our creativity. And it informs our hopes. My prayer today is for Satyagrahua, this prayer of the war atheist. Let us lay down that sword and shield. I ain't gonna believe in war no more. Amen. Host of the longest-running nature and science series in the history of television, geneticist Dr. David Suzuki went from being detained as an enemy alien in a Canadian internment camp to being chosen as the greatest living Canadian in a nationwide poll. Today, this author of more than 30 best-selling books urges people to leave a cleaner environment for future generations by reconsidering humanity's relationship with nature and redefining progress. In Vancouver, British Columbia, David Suzuki, a third-generation Japanese Canadian, was born in 1936. In Suzuki's fourth year, his father began taking him fishing and camping nearly every weekend to coastal British Columbia's abundant waterways and lush temperate rainforests. It is there that Suzuki first developed his love for nature. Unfortunately for Suzuki, his idyllic childhood took an unexpected turn in 1941 when Japan attacked Hawaii's Pearl Harbor. Simply because they had Japanese ancestry, all Japanese Canadians were seen by the Canadian government as enemy aliens. Their property was seized, and they were sent to internment camps. Suzuki's family was sent to a camp in the interior of British Columbia, where they lived in a dilapidated and bug-infested building for 3 years. Vast, rugged terrain surrounding the camp was seen by officials as a natural fence because they assumed that dangers such as getting lost, succumbing to hypothermia, or being attacked by wild animals would deter escapee attempts. However, Suzuki saw the landscape differently and took every opportunity to explore the pristine wilderness. These adventures piqued his interest in biology, and he recalled, quote, "This was the biology as it should be learned, firsthand in the wild, joyously and effortlessly," unquote. After World War II ended in 1945, Japan Canadians were released from the camps, ordered out of British Columbia, and given a choice: move back to Japan or east of the Rocky Mountains. Choosing the second option, the Suzukis boarded an eastbound train and eventually settled in London, Ontario. Starting over in this predominantly Caucasian city, Suzuki confided, quote, "The war years had left me with an overriding sense of inferiority, and I anticipated rejection because I was Japanese," unquote. The uncomfortable youth found solace in a wetland near his home. Quote, "That swamp was my salvation. All my hang-ups, fears, and frustrations fell away when I biked to that marsh," unquote. Sadly, in time, his refuge was covered with an enormous shopping center and parking lot. After graduating from high school, Suzuki went to the U.S., earning a bachelor's degree in biology from Amherst College in 1958 and a PhD in zoology from the University of Chicago in 1961. Specializing in genetics, Suzuki saw that humans are genetically linked to one another. This insight strengthened his resolve to oppose racism, and while studying fruit flies at Oak Ridge National Laboratory in Tennessee, he became the only non-Black member of the local chapter of the NAACP. Following a year at Oak Ridge and another at the University of Alberta, Canada, Suzuki returned to his birthplace, Vancouver, and began teaching at the University of British Columbia. There, his environmental consciousness awakened when he read Rachel Carson's Silent Spring and came face to face with forest destruction. Having married a fellow Japanese Canadian named Joanne and having 3 children, Suzuki wanted to give his children nature excursions like those his father had given him. During one hike, Suzuki and his children happened upon a shocking sight: an old-growth forest that had been clear-cut, all of its trees cut down for industrial logging. Trudging through the hot, barren landscape of jagged tree stumps that Suzuki later compared to a war zone, he and his children finally reached the edge of the standing forest. A wave of coolness washed over Suzuki as he walked into the shade of the giant trees, his step cushioned by lush moss that carpeted the forest floor. Breathing in the rich, moist air, he marveled at the serene silence of this majestic grove. Later, he realized that such forests deserve respect and reflected, quote, "That encounter with an ancient forest on the edge of a clear-cut was my moment of enlightenment," unquote. Sadly, within weeks of his visit to this forest, it too was destroyed. Infusing his concern for nature into his work and wanting to make science accessible to the general public, Suzuki began hosting science-themed radio and television shows. By 1979, he had become the host of Canadian Broadcasting Corporation's series, The Nature of Things, which had been airing since 1960. With Suzuki's engaging way of examining subjects ranging from human aggression to organic farming, the program skyrocketed in popularity. Eventually, airing in more than 55 countries, it became the longest-running television series in Canada. In 1985, Suzuki hosted an 8-part series called A Planet for the Taking. Although at times shocking and disturbing, the series attracted a large audience. This encouraged Suzuki to increase environmental coverage in his future radio and television broadcasts, newspaper columns, and books. Grappling with problems such as clear-cut logging, acid rain, and global warming, the passionate Suzuki urged people to reconnect with nature and reconsider common notions of progress. Boldly, he asserted, quote, "Without intimacy with nature, we can confuse crimes against the earth with economic and technological progress. It seems to me that nature is screaming with warnings about our impact on the environment. We think wistfully of what has been lost and dismissed it as the price of progress. It's about time we start redefining progress," unquote. After the radio series, It's a Matter of Survival in 1989, Suzuki received more than 17,000 letters from listeners asking how they could help the environment. Responding to this surge of interest, in 1990, Suzuki and his wife, Dr. Tara Cullis, founded the David Suzuki Foundation, which strives to find and share innovative solutions that balance human needs and nature's needs. These needs, the foundation points out, are intimately connected because in order to thrive, humans need such things as clean air to breathe, clean water to drink, and clean soil in which to grow food. To Suzuki, environmentalism entails, quote, "finding our place in the world and our balance in the support systems of the planet," unquote. Suzuki believes that most people in industrialized countries are out of balance with these systems, as they use exorbitant amounts of energy and resources to grow the economy and make and buy an endless stream of unnecessary and unfulfilling products. He observes, quote, "We seem to feel we've got to get more money in order to buy more stuff, and yet if you think about it, does stuff really make us happier? I think that we've got to really sit down and ask, what is it all about? What are things that really matter? Unquote. If mass overconsumption continues, Suzuki worries that results will be disastrous. He declares, "We need a completely different accounting and value system that can bring us back into what balance with the realities of the earth. And the first place to start is by recognizing that steady, mindless growth, as is also the case with cancer, can be deadly," unquote. It can be deadly, he believes, to both environmental health and human relations. The concerned scientist explains, quote, "Increasingly frequent droughts and other extreme weather events, expanding disease vectors, and lowered water tables leading to freshwater scarcity are just some of the expected problems in the future." Small aside today. These sorts of stresses can create environmental refugees and lead to resource conflicts. Preventing environmental degradation is therefore essential to world security and world peace, unquote. In turn, human conflicts often further degrade the environment. As Suzuki points out, quote, "Those who live under the threat of terror, genocide, or war are concerned with their own survival, and often the tactics of war that they live are also themselves ecological disasters. You just have to look at the impact of the atomic bomb, at the impact of napalm, of Agent Orange, which was really a poison spread across the forests, and of biological weapons that kill animal or plant stocks of a society," unquote. To curtain this vicious cycle, in 2004, the David Suzuki Foundation launched a comprehensive plan called Sustainability Within a Generation. The plan states, quote, "By reducing our consumption of resources, we will actually be improving our quality of life. For example, switching to a car that uses half as much fuel or a refrigerator that uses 1/10 of the electricity provides the same level of service and satisfaction, protects nature, and saves money," unquote. Outlining 9 steps to significantly improve the economy, the environment, and international relations in less than 30 years, the plan is gaining support in Canada and beyond, due in part to its cooperative approach. Suzuki says, quote, "The aim in confronting the issues is not to exacerbate divisions and create adversaries. We are all in it together, and we all have to change. The real issue is our daughters and sons and the kind of society and planet that we choose to leave them," unquote. Perhaps in appreciation of his positive approach, in a 2004 nationwide poll, CBC voters voted Suzuki as the greatest living Canadian. Nonetheless, he insists that he does not want any more recognition, money, or fame, but instead to do his best to leave a livable planet for his and all grandchildren. Thus, even in his own life, as he ascended from enemy alien to the greatest living Canadian, Dr. David Suzuki is defining progress. We will now see a song called Cool It, the global cooling song. It was written and performed by David Raffi, it has David Suzuki in the audience, and was filmed at the David Suzuki Foundation. It'll be followed by more quotes.
It down, cool it down, cool this planet
temperatures are rising, Arctic ice is melting, polar bears are scrambling, the heat is all around. We've got to cool it down, cool it down. Appealing to the masses to cut our greenhouse gases down. Wacky weather here, stormy weather there. Climate change is on us, the signs are everywhere. We've got to cool it down, cool it down. Take shelter from the storm, come together, cool it down. Governments and CEOs, hear the people's call. Don't leave your engines idle, there's no time to stall. All around the world, in the country and the towns, there's a growing global chorus, and it's ringing in the halls. Cool it, cool this planet down. Cool it down. Cool this planet down. Cool it down. Do it for the children, do it for yourself. Everybody's needed, everyone can help to cool this planet down. Cool it down. Hear us singing. Cool this planet down. Cool it down. Let's hear that guitar. Little bit of piano.
That last quote is one of my favorites. Arthur Foote brings us these words for giving. Freely have we received of gifts that minister to our needs of body and spirit. Gladly we bring to our church and its wide concerns a portion of this bounty. Please give generously. The bowl awaits, or you may donate online. I invite you to rise in body or spirit for the benediction and extinguishing the chalice. Our benediction today is When We Say, Go Now in Peace, written by Amy McKinsey Quinn. When we say, Go now in peace, we mean the peace that asks us to stop grasping after power, and the peace that demands that we live fully, that we love with a fierce love, that we hope with a bold hope, and that we pray and sing and struggle. Remember this, within and all around us is our source. May we return to it, heed it, and honor it. Amen. Please join me in saying the words to extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Go in peace to be peace.